Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe. Okay, all right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to yet another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast, where we talk to the real people behind broadband, enterprise networking, and cybersecurity, and aim to show you that we're actually real human beings that make everything work for you, even though it's kind of a thankless job sometimes. I'm your host, Jason Walls from QA Cafe. It is kind of our podcast. And today I am here with Brennan and Alex, both from Cisco Meraki. And we have been working with them very closely on a number of things lately, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but that's not all we're going to talk about today, so that's fine. But they're very cool, and they are here. And this is our first multi-guest podcast. So thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. We're going to see how the video looks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. As always, the Epik Mellon podcast is brought to you entirely by my employers at QA Cafe. And so the views expressed by myself or my guests do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its ownership. And I imagine that goes doubly, triply, 100,000 times, even more the case for Brennan and Alex and Cisco, because they're a big company. And I bet a lot of stuff happens.
Yeah, better safe than sorry. Sure.
Right. Epik Mellon is brought to you by QA Cafe, and we have several great products that make that possible for you. Those include our test and analysis tools, including CD Router, which is the industry standard test solution for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi devices, and other customer premises equipment with thousands of fully automated test cases that you don't have to build so that you can get on to doing better things. Also Passport, which is our similar tool for end devices like set-top boxes, smart home equipment, and anything that is running over IP and might have a lot of problems that you don't know about. And you probably want to solve them before they become bad reviews on Amazon. Our other products are on the network analysis side, and that includes CloudShark, which has been around for quite a while and helps people work together on network packet captures. And more recently, Packet Viewer, which is essentially the ability to OEM the power of CloudShark and put it into your own products. And it is something we're going to probably talk about a lot today with Brennan and Alex, because it's now in what is now called intelligent capture as of a few minutes ago.
It's true.
We have a naming
ready
issue
to release it. Yeah, it's not quite available
it's
yet.
I get it. Well, no, but we should talk about that too, because I'll put a pin in that because I want to talk about how weird and esoteric the word PCAP is and that world is entirely, which I'm sure you guys have run into so many times. But I want to talk a little bit first about who you guys are and where you come from and how you even got doing this, right? Like some of us were actually had goals of being software developers or network engineers, and that's the direction everybody went into, but a vast majority of people kind of got here by accident.
Yes. Brennan, you should go first because you've got a fun one.
I like to think so. Thanks for that, Jason and Alex. Yeah, okay, so I live in Canada, and oftentimes I just say Canada because it's easier than explaining to a lot of the people that I work with these days that I live in a city, and trust me, it is actually a city named Saskatoon in the province of Saskatchewan in Canada. And with the people I work with, it's kind of like an 8 out of 10 can't locate it on the map sort of thing.
How often do you have to say those two words together?
I say it all the time, right? Because I live from here, right? But right. There's really only one pop culture reference that people are familiar with. So when I say Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Alex, what do you think of?
It depends. It might be Letterkenny, but
it's not Letterkenny.
I was going to say Letterkenny, even though it's not there.
Okay, well, that's a good one too because it's not far off. Although it's like you'd have to take a plane and
isn't it more Calgary
driving to get there? I was thinking usually what comes up when people say Saskatoon is that scene in the Grown Ups movie when the very muscular dude in I think a very small swimsuit walks up to the lady standing by the pool looking like he's going to approach the ladies. He looks very confident. As soon as he opens his mouth, he has a very squeaky high voice and says that he's from something like Saskatchewan, and it's just this total facepalm moment now. So when I do say Saskatoon, that's often the reference people picture in their
People
head and say
repeat
it
back
out
to you in
loud.
the voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen the movie in its entirety, to be honest, but that scene I'm very familiar with for that reason. So that's all to say that I joke that this is the Silicon Valley of Canada. And I mean, there are arguments that could be made for that to be true, but it's, it's a pretty obscure place. And so I grew up here in a big agriculture and mining based province. The city's 300,000 people. I mean, we've got 1 million people in the entire province, very, very loosely populated. And so I got into networking, 25 years ago, I guess, almost by chance. I was going to be a pilot. I have a private pilot's license, but I wasn't willing to kind of, go live in the bush for a year or two, actually loading planes rather than flying them. So I fell into networking. And learned about Cisco the way everybody else did, through all of the CCNA guidebooks and so on and so forth, and deployed that kind of gear for customers for years. But I was kind of resigned to the fact that I was never going to work for Cisco. I was, this is my home. It's where my family are. Our cabin is up here at the lake, and so there was never kind of this idea that I would be one of the many people in Saskatchewan that left the province to go to the meccas of civilization, where these technology companies.
They hand you a backpack and a walking stick.
Yeah. So over the years, I met people, there, and there was always this idea of if you're ever willing to move to California or even Vancouver, we might have a place for you. But I was resigned to, the fact that I was staying here. And of course, then, like a lot of people, COVID changed everything. And suddenly every company, including Cisco, was much more interested in finding talent wherever they were located. And we all heavily invested into what we're doing now, really good ways to collaborate from your basement. And I've basically, never left my basement since.
He does have a map behind him to remind him of what the rest of the world looks like, though.
It's like, have you guys watched the Fallout TV series?
Yes,
where they have the projection of what a cornfield actually looks like, and they just
no, so well done. Yeah,
yes, it was so good. It was so good. Very rare is an adaptation that good, but it was so good.
For me, I never played Fallout the game, but I watched the series and loved it so much that I pretty immediately was like, all right, I'm going to have to go buy myself a gaming system that can run Fallout.
That happened a lot. There was this huge renaissance of Fallout 4 at the very least, if not.
And Fallout 76, which was interesting. They actually fixed that game, I guess.
Yeah.
So I ditched that one because I was like, I don't think I'm going to play this. I've heard all the negative feedback, and then looked online, and it's actually they went from sub 10,000 people online to hundreds of thousands after the show aired. Yeah.
Well, so we know that show is going to get funded for a while.
Yeah, I mean they did such a good job. I mean it kept me happy because I unlike Brennan, I actually played a bunch of the Fallout games, and yeah. It did a really good job sticking with the storyline, a lot of the lore. I don't know,
and making it its own thing rather than trying to redo another story. Like Last of Us, right?
Yep.
The show. Yeah,
even that was good though. Yeah.
No, it's great. Yeah. Cool. So yes, so now thanks to the fact that we can all work out of our basements, we're first just go. I think about this often though because. You get the back and forth of people being like, "Oh yeah, remote work was awesome," and then it wasn't awesome, and then everything going through the peaks and the troughs a bit. But it really is sticking around, and even almost every job posting that I see on LinkedIn is remote, almost all of them, which I'm surprised. Right, I would like the turnaround speed of people being totally okay with that was, well, I guess because we had to, right?
Yeah. It seems, I think 50-50 almost seems to be the outcome now. We're seeing, I think, almost as much return to work, or return to office mandates, I suppose, is the word we hear as kind of now, let's roll with it. But one joke I like to actually make about this working in my basement thing is in Saskatchewan, we have such a big mining industry. And like 15 years ago, I stepped foot off of a lift is what it's called, but like thousands of meters below the earth in this giant cave, and kind of went, and I spent 10 years doing this underground, and it's almost prophetic now that I spend all my time in my basement working, underground still, right? I find that to be one of those weird, like, foretelling.
Literally acclimated.
Yeah. At least I can see sunlight out the window. Let's be clear, but
then I start to get a little nervous and a little agoraphobic,
You know what? I tell you, the one thing I never had happen underground was claustrophobia. It is not as tight down there as you think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Just the anxiety of knowing.
Right. No, exactly. Right. Plus all the horror stories, but it's the same statistics as flying a plane, right?
So yeah. Recently.
Oh yeah, right. which is funny because it's like there were so few incidents in the past that now that there are even just a smidge more, like it throws all the numbers.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So unless horrifying things.
Right.
Yeah. I guess I can go ahead. Was that it, Brennan, or did you have more to talk about there?
I mean, I can talk about myself for hours, Alex. That's also a side effect of living in my basement, but we should probably give you, a chance to speak.
No, yeah. Background wise, I never wanted to get into networking. I took some courses when I got out of high school, like IP addresses, protocols. This stuff kind of sucks. And I really wanted to be a sysadmin, and because I really enjoyed oh
my God, what was wrong?
Managing computers. I know. I used to think I enjoyed managing computers, and I had taken a bunch of this is sad, but I'd taken a bunch of Windows Server 2003 courses and all sorts of stuff. I was all sorts of excited, and I started to realize it's hard to get a role it's hard to get a role where I lived at the time. So speaking of being in the middle of nowhere, at the time I lived up in Wyoming in a small city. It's calling it a city is a little rough, but maybe a town.
Well, let's do a quick comparison though. When you say a small city, what would you guess the population would be?
Around 60,000.
Okay, so like an actual small city.
Yeah.
I love it. This is why we get along so well, is because oftentimes, people come here and they're like, oh, it's, barely a town. And I'm like, screw you. This is a giant city.
Don't you have like 200,000 people? 300,000. Yeah, it's
not quite, but
size.
Almost.
So where I live in Portsmouth, it's basically a tourist town, right? And so the population goes from 21,000 to 40,000 ish, right, in the summer. But that's it. But we get off on the technicality that it is incorporated as a city. So we're like, no, we are.
I mean, I found out only probably 5 years ago that all it takes is 5,000 people here. As soon as you get 5,000, you can be a city. And so we have some cities that are nearby that basically are counted in that 300,000 as part of our greater area.
I didn't know they were taking their classifications from the Dungeon Master Guide.
Right? I'm not sure
population
if that's,
of a medieval town.
I know it's it kind of goes, and there's all sorts of names for towns under five. You get villages, towns, hamlets, and then suddenly it's like everything's a city. Right. Sorry, Alex. Wyoming.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I lived up in Wyoming, and it turned out getting a sysadmin job was nearly impossible. And then one of my close friends was like, "Hey, I just got this job at this service provider. You should join me." It's mostly WISP, type wireless service provider, because everything was rural, right? You had we did resell DSL, which was awful. And then
so you're totally in my wheelhouse. That's cool.
Yeah, cool. PPPoA, doing the ATM, it was a good time. But
why don't you die?
Dude, there's so many things that I did not enjoy about that part. I even supported dial-up for a while there because we had some parts of the state that were so far out in the middle of nowhere that the only thing we could do is have and we had this woman's basement was dedicated, we paid her money to host a bunch of racks of old dial-up equipment, and used to have to ask this cat lady to go reboot equipment in the middle of the day. Like, hey,
I tell
hate
this
to say that.
anecdote
Was
all the
that?
time. I tell this anecdote. I've told it on the show a couple times, but just real quick, like I was at the New York State Telecom Association for like a presentation, and we're sitting there in the audience. I'm waiting to go up, and there's this old guy and his wife sitting in front of me, listening to these presentations, and she's like knitting, right, or like, and he's like doing a crossword or something, and they telephone them.
Oh
So
my
it's like
lord!
when you think mom and pop telco, it was actually a mom and pop telco.
No kidding.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it was funny though, because like I worked there for a few years, climbed a lot of towers, like learned a lot about wireless, especially what you don't do, and how to work with really cryptic networking equipment that I won't mention, that is very heavily used in the service provider industry and very cheap. And yeah, one day I realized that the only way I was going to get like a well-paying or a better-paying job was to move. So I moved down to Denver and took a job at a Cisco partner. And I still didn't really understand networking, which is sad because I worked at a service provider for like 2 years. And yeah, spent 6+ years there, and then finally decided one day I'd come try to apply at Cisco, and I applied for many different roles. It took me, I'm not even going to say how many interviews across different companies and then interviews at Cisco, but finally got in. Had to come in as a sales engineer, and then figured out my path to getting into product management because I enjoyed that part a lot more. I think it was taking the experiences that I kind of gained from being a customer, being in a partner role, working with customers, and like
Right.
all the things that were so terribly difficult to get across, especially when you have like a really like comprehensive solution you've deployed, but they understand very little of it. And you're like,
Right.
so I'm going to be supporting you for the rest of my life, guaranteed. And yeah, I figured, it'd be fun to come into the, kind of the product development side of things and be able to help shape things that are a little bit more approachable.
Right. And it is super important though to come from that side. Not always, but you get like so much more coming from that side first, because ultimately what you're trying to do is give the customers what they want. And if you've never been in that position, then it's very hard to understand that, right? And
It
then it
is.
falls on people like me, whose job is to translate technology into into messaging, right? Um, especially because I have to do it for standards too and stuff. And it's like, it's just, that's such a painful process if it's been designed by people who don't understand this.
That's a big thing too. And I think we see it a lot, and people of all walks of life end up in, different roles in product management. I will say that anyone can learn. It does help to have a really rounded background, I think, just when it comes to understanding like how quickly can you go from talking to a customer to understanding what needs to be done to enhance or fix the, experience in a way that
Right.
is useful. But yeah, no, 100%. I actually have no qualms with the fact that I had a role making less than $30,000 a year for multiple years at a service provider. Knowing that, where I am today, I'm happy. So, yeah.
Well, that's
It
good.
works out
That's
nicely.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. It's like I said, it's like you don't, I try to tell, like, because our teenager's graduating next year, and she's like always getting tons of pressure. High schools are terrible, right? Because they're basically, college machines, right? And
Right.
which is not to say that people shouldn't go to college, but they're very, very adamant about telling you that you need to do X, Y, and Z, and like start planning your life. And it's like, dude, I am not doing anything that I expected to be doing when I got out of high school. Like,
100%. I thought I was going to be,
all.
in marketing, like actually in marketing, which is funny because my
Really?
role says technical marketing engineer in my role, but not at all marketing. But yeah, that was my goal when I was graduating. I was like, I'm going to be in
No, but
marketing.
legit, like that's what that title basically boils down to, is us trying to translate the stuff that people built into the value that people want and back again, right?
Yeah,
The
it's
back
kind of
part's
wild.
really important. It's got to be a cycle for sure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I knew Alex had gone through this kind of sysadmin stuff, and I'm chuckling because I went through a similar thing where I remember spending about a year resetting people's passwords and unjamming printers. And I think I remember at one point in time, like being up to my shoulder inside a multi-function printer in one of those offices, trying to yank out the one piece of paper that was still stuck somewhere it shouldn't be.
Never again.
And I was like, I've had enough of this. I think it's time to move on to something else.
Yeah.
But those experiences have been really important in our roles for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so let's talk about that a little bit, because so one of the things that I've always liked about networking as an industry, as a field, is that it kind of it's been this experience for almost all of us here at QA Cafe, because most of us came from the University of New Hampshire's interoperability lab, right? And they're basically a laboratory that tests network equipment, a lot of Cisco stuff, and they employ the students to do it. And it's not like an internship or anything like that. They literally just pay these kids to run tests and learn about networking. And so, but they hire anybody, right? They hire anybody because anyone can learn networking. It's like a low bar to entry, but difficult to master kind of a thing, which I've always sort of appreciated, right? But when it comes to some of the stuff like packet captures and actually looking at packets and things like that, it's not necessarily the same, right?
No.
And it's you guys have run into that wholeheartedly in deciding to do what you've done. And so it's like, I know I have a lot of assumptions about the world and just the experience of people dealing with those things, right? I'd like that the fact that, I mean, pcaps for just to explain to the audience real quick, because my dad's listening. So, I try to go to the layman explanation first so the internet's chopped up into little packets of information, and all of the equipment that you have is designed to decide where those things should go, that they got there reliably, and that they can be reassembled and done so securely, right? That's mostly how the internet works, right?
I feel like there's a really good analogy, RFC, for the QoS over avian carriers that would be actually a good bridge.
The carrier
You know
pigeon.
what's so cool about that carrier pigeon RFC is that those concepts of what they have to deal with are actually kind of a reality for like what they're thinking about with like Mars and stuff, right? It's like if you have to try to do TCP to Mars,
You're going to have to have a different kind of sliding
problems.
window than on Earth, yeah.
Right.
That's funny.
So it wasn't totally useless. But yeah, so there is a way of recording all that information. We call those packet captures, and there is a format for those packet captures that is used very frequently when it's recorded permanently. You can actually look at packet captures sort of as a stream, and it's not necessarily built as this format, but this format is very standardized. It's called a pcap. The most common way of looking at pcaps is a tool called Wireshark. And what we've experienced at QA Cafe in selling products that work with packet captures like CloudShark and Packet Viewer is that the skill set is very esoteric, right? And there's basically like not a handful, but let's say a small city's worth of people
Yeah.
who really know it, right? And Brennan, I remember you said on the podcast that like it's very scary for a lot of people at first, right? But once you sort of get into it, then you kind of realize that it's way faster to just look at them if you know what you're doing. And so part of our whole goal has to just been make it easier to get to them and to make it easier to know what you're doing, right?
Yeah, that's very true. I liked how you said too, like you can kind of train anybody to do networking, and there are definitely a lot of people in the industry who fall into that kind of anyone category, which is not to like say anything, but networking is such a wide discipline, like so many other things, people don't really understand how far down that rabbit hole you can go. And so there are lots of people who like even look at packet captures every day, but really only skim the surface. Like they know exactly what to look for. DHCP is the important thing. For instance, I'm just trying to figure out why this client can't connect. So I type DHCP into the filter, and that's what I see. But like there is so much stuff underneath the hood, even in Wireshark, that today, like I don't know how to do it. It can do some cool graphing, and really help you understand the latencies of like every exchange. And most people never even go that far.
Right.
And like there's great, easy to access material on how to really do deep packet capture analysis. But I would venture that there are probably, like you said, I know maybe 2 people who really know packet analysis to that level.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So in the world, it's probably like,
they're all at
certainly
Shark
less
Fest
than
last
50.
week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Or was it
mean,
this
to
week? It
that,
might be this week.
I mean, to that point though, I was always very apprehensive of digging into a packet capture when I worked at the partner I worked for. I was very much about, best practice implementations, following the guides, validating everything is done the way it needs to be done. And I never really got too interested in pcaps until later in my career. I would say probably right around when I got my CCIE, and I started to want to dig into what actually is going on.
As part of the training, right?
Well, to a degree, actually, you technically could never open a PCAP and probably pass the CCIE exam by knowing just how things are supposed to be configured and knowing like a lot of the really odd parts of it. I think that what makes things even better is when you start digging into, okay, so now I've learned these protocols. What do they actually look like? And what are they doing? And what are the exchanges that are happening? And I think one of the things that got me into, packet analysis was actually doing a ton of security work and doing, radius implementations and having to understand EAP transactions and authenticating endpoints. And that was actually what got me into packet captures in the first place. Cause it's like, okay, you're telling me your client is doing something. This desktop is trying to connect. It's definitely not sending the credentials that you think it is. Oh no, it totally is. I can tell you, I'm looking right at it. And it's like, okay, we're going to grab a PCAP.
So am I.
We're going to look at the packet capture and look at this. It's saying that its username is something completely different. Why? And it became like the kind of the silver bullet to like remote debugging, troubleshooting, and even like after the fact kind of like validation for, helping people with like labs they're standing up or even production environments is just grab a packet capture, send it to me. And when I have a spare minute, I'll take a look.
Right.
Yeah.
I love those stories. I think we've all got those like superhero stories almost where, you're arguing with, and it's a service provider or another consultant that's responsible for some other piece of equipment. And like the person who wins is always, the guy who inevitably went to the packet captures and was able to actually prove what was going on. Right. There's always been, it's been figuring out, MTU problems, but the one that I always remember is, I think it was a phone system company that was doing like call recording, and we were sending traffic over a VPN, and they were adamant, that the traffic was not coming across the VPN, and it was the embedded packet capture on the firewall that, I was able to use to prove that the call recordings were in fact, exiting, the link towards their, recording system. And, you feel so vindicated, right? When you pull out the packet capture, slap it down the table and, pull out the Matt Damon. How do you like those apples? Or them apples, pardon me. It's my Canadian accent coming through. So like there's a real power to being able to really read those. And I'm to this day amazed at how people who really are, required to make networks work often aren't comfortable enough to do that.
Yeah. It makes you think about it.
Well, you might say it's a difficult process.
Yeah.
I only say that because our digital marketing firm Z Factor, the ones who helped me put this podcast together, they're out of Toronto, and so I make fun of their accents all the time.
Yeah, we've had an ongoing joke for like 7 years, Brennan and I, around Canada. Usually it's deprecating Canadians, and then Brennan gets upset, but always fun.
And then somehow I apologize for it anyways.
Yeah, at the end, yes, always. Like, I'm sorry about that.
It's the Canadians. That's a fun story, actually. Like Alex and I think met online, which sounds like some sort of weird online dating story, but in in the wireless community, there's a lot of kind of presence and a community around. It used to be Twitter, but now like Wi-Fi professionals are few and far between, so they tend to meet online. So we knew of each other,
Yeah.
but we met at a wireless conference years ago and kind of been friends ever since. But one of the things that came out of this whole like you need to get on Twitter to engage with the community thing was the idea of the Canadian Wi-Fi protocol 802.11 or A, right? And I remember doing a presentation at that wireless conference about my experience in mining underground, because like people seem to really get interested in not only industrial stuff, which this is before IoT became a big thing, but even just the pictures of doing like Wi-Fi underground.
Yeah.
And so I remember coming off stage from that presentation, having the conference organizer say to me, "Well, there you go, Brennan. Now you'll be known for something." And I was like, "Underground, like industrial, wireless," because I was like thinking that's pretty cool. I'll be the guy known for that. And he's like, no, 802.11a. Like it had become enough of a shtick at that point in time. People really liked the stickers we had.
I can't escape
right?
you.
Yeah, we had made the stickers, and for a while it was just fun to like on Twitter, make a parody account and start talking about the RFC specifications of this fictitious protocol, like how there's an additional SRY flag in the 802.11 header, so that when there's a collision, the stations actually apologize for it. Like, oh, sorry, didn't see you there. So there was this kind of, I was chagrined, I think, to be all like, all right, well, if there's one thing I'm going to be known for, it's going to be having made up a fake Wi-Fi protocol.
No, and then after, when they're trying to do sort of like the medium, when they're allowed to talk sort of thing, they're like, you go first. No, you go first. No, you go first.
After there was some, the one I remember, of course, is the SRY flag, but I should go dig through my Twitter and see. There were about 2 or 3 like really good jokes that got me a couple of extra followers, and then it kind
I think
the
thing that I love the most about it is that there are people that believe it's an actual like standard now and believe that Brennan is a good share of it. Yeah, and they congratulate him every year. Yeah.
So, yeah. So some people are in on the joke, obviously, but I put it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know how many years it's been. 5-6 years ago, I put it on LinkedIn as like I'm the chair of the 802.11 alliance. And then there's a few people obviously in the industry who are in on the joke, and every year kind of congratulate me on one more year.
I don't think all of them know though.
The committee.
I don't think all of them know.
Some of them probably don't look that hard. One of these days, the problem is going to be is there will actually be an 802.11 amendment somewhere, and then I'll get in trouble or a cease and desist order or something like
that. You should try to do whatever Canadians do for copywriting.
Yeah, copyright it now. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, but this is mine.
I just want 25 cents every time somebody says it.
That would be amazing.
It sounds like an opportunity to write one of those, mock RFCs and have it actually, ratified, if that's the term for RFCs.
Yeah, and then claim IPR. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh my, that'd be too good.
What was I going to say? Oh, the underground Wi-Fi thing. I was just listening to the podcast, the Cisco Champion podcast, previous to the one that you did. What's all about that? Not about mining specifically, but about industrial Wi-Fi, basically, right? And connectivity, and how you can't switch stuff out because, like, these things literally have to run 24/7. So, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think of those guys like MacGyvers, right? It's kind of like, all I've got here is my electrical tape and a pair of pliers, and if I forgot a tool, I'm gonna have to drive like an hour back to the shop. So let me see what I can figure out, right? So the times that we had access points powered by actual car batteries and alligator clips, were not that uncommon in those places. And I know Alex mentions, like other Wi-Fi vendors that we don't need to name. There's a lot of random pieces of equipment strewn together by some really like what's the word, like ingenious people, right, who are just their entire jobs are just making stuff work, right? And
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing too, because a lot of those guys would never look at a packet capture. They don't really know what's going on under the hood, but through years of trial and error, they know if they like, lick this and touch that while connecting to that, something will start moving, right? And I learned a lot from people like that for sure. Like,
Well, and ironically, a lot of those practices become standards, and that's how the internet works.
yeah, that's very true as well.
Because well, actually, that's come up a couple of times. I don't know if you guys know UC community from
Who doesn't know UC? What
I
an
know this
awesome
just
guy.
came up again for me today, right? Like it's talking about the wireless community, right? Because I was going to say before you were talking about how broad networking is. It's also kind of siloed, right? So it's like all the wireless people are together, and all of the all of the authentication and enterprise networking people are together. That's like security people are all together, right?
Yeah.
But the wireless people are definitely all together,
Yeah.
and I always like that he said that Wi-Fi is a victim of its own success, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
because it's everywhere and we've gotten so used to it, but it wasn't built to handle a lot of the use cases that we use it for. That's
Right.
basically the boat we're in now. It's entirely why we need cloud managed networking solutions, right? Like Meraki dashboard and all that is because Wi-Fi is it doesn't suck. It definitely is very good at the stuff it does, but it wasn't meant to do everything.
Nope.
And
Well,
now we're like trying to paste stuff onto it.
yeah. I mean, realistically, I would say you could. Most people in Wi-Fi would probably argue it's not very good at what it does, and that's maybe the reason why.
Well, I mean, it's if you argue that Wi-Fi is not very good at what it does, then Ethernet wasn't originally very good at what it was, which it wasn't,
No,
which is why they reduced the collision domain to 1, right?
it's such a great story, though. Like, we've all grown up where like the Ethernet protocol is pretty much the same as when we started in the industry, but we've watched so many iterations of Wi-Fi go, like you said, because it's a victim of its own success, kind of go, this doesn't work very well. We better fix it and release a new version of Wi-Fi. And it's happened now 4 or 5 times in my lifetime. And it's kind of really exciting. I was doing a presentation yesterday where I was like, Wi-Fi feels like it's getting really mature. Like it's
Yep.
learned a lot from cellular technology as an example, and it's adapted and it's become
Yeah.
so much more reliable. And it wasn't that long ago we were all laughing at Wi-Fi saying we were going to need, switch ports faster than 1 gigabit per second and saying, okay, boomer, that'll, sure. And like, this week I've actually got Wi-Fi in my house that can easily do 1 gigabit per second, under, good conditions. But it's like there is a material improvement happening, and it is a victim of its own success in that respect. Like it's really driving the industry in IoT. So I don't think we've seen that with a lot of other protocols. We you talk about how fragile some of the things are in the every time somebody injects accidentally something into BGP or DNS and half the internet falls over.
Well, that's the big news, right?
I think Wi-Fi is doing a pretty good job right now for such a popular protocol.
Yeah, just everything has to be Wi-Fi now, and everything's Wi-Fi connected. Coffee pots, refrigerators, dishwashers.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
I made the mistake of thinking that was an amazing thing, and now I just question my choices when I get notifications. Like my fridge door's open. I'm like, thank you for that. I definitely needed that today. Kids, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, they're sitting there digging through the fridge trying to find a yogurt. Left the fridge open for a minute and a half. Anyway.
No, it's true. And it's like I find that stuff valuable, even though, we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of how, consumer electronics suddenly being thrust into being connected pieces
Smart.
of software, right?
Or lack thereof.
That I mean, now you have to treat it like an actual product with a life cycle and updates and all those things. And people who sell refrigerators were never thinking about that. They sell refrigerators, the refrigerators die, and people buy new ones. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah. I am
you don't put on a development cycle.
So my wife is starting to talk, about maybe we've outgrown our home. It's getting time to maybe like look at moving, right? And we're not in any rush, but I am deathly afraid of leaving my house, for fear of having to start my like connected journey all over again And I don't even know, there's laws, right, around like what you can take with you when you leave a house, and a lot of it revolves around antiquated ideas of what's attached to the walls, right? And so I'm looking at all of my cameras, my doorbells, the thermostats, and
Oh,
going
that's
like,
right.
can I take this with me?
I mean, doorbell especially, because that's a big investment. You're paying like subscription fees for all that. Like that's your own doorbell.
And I mean, it's going to be useless to the next owner unless they factory reset it and bother to dive into August, Ecobee, Wemo, like all of these infrastructures, right? So I'm a HomeKit guy for the most part, but guys like Alex is awful. Like you're very homebrew, home assistant. You'll connect all sorts of disparate systems together, and like I can only imagine the poor bugger that buys your house from you.
Well, so what you do is you write into the like sales agreement that you're taking it with you, because I just did that like 2 years ago, and I had one person say, "Yeah, those cameras, you're leaving them. Like I can't legally leave them with you. They're work related. Like I'm testing them. They're not even production. Like, you can't have them." And he was very upset with me. Like I'll leave the Ethernet drops for you. You can have those. You can put your own in. It'll be
No, I mean, but they're yours. You bought them. Like, come on.
yeah.
Like,
Doesn't
yeah,
all
no,
come
I
with
mean,
the
they come
house.
to your service. Yeah.
I mean, that brings another aspect. Like, I'm also deathly afraid of having to either go to Home Depot or, heaven forbid, go through the tickle trunk I've got in my garage and find the old thermostat that was here when I moved in
and put it back.
Right? So do I remember how it was just 2 wires. That's all it is. It can't be that hard, Brennan.
The worst part is it's like 5 wires. So you
right.
got a number to
It's all
try
the
with.
stuff that we learned in control systems.
Oh, shoot.
There were 2 things that made me think of. One was, Alex, I wanted to touch on the fact because you said you used to work in DSL, right? And one of the things about that I was that Matt Langlois here, right? I used to work with him in DSL at UNH, and we always talk about the fact that Wi-Fi, it's still using effectively what is discrete multi-tone technology, right, to transmit information. And it's like its whole job of DSL was to transmit information of the worst environment imaginable, other than air. And then they said, wait, what if we do that too?
Oh, man. The first thing I thought of when you mentioned in the worst environment brought me to thinking about having to hook up fax machines to SIP environments, and then having to do T38 and figuring out like why on earth something that could work on an analog line couldn't work for like to save its life with a digital tone.
I think we could probably start a support group just talking about fax and IP networks.
Oh man. Speaking of that service provider, that was one of the things I used to get tasked with all the time was like, go on site, we're managing their voice environment, and they need you to hook up this fax machine. Like, oh, and the first time I did it, I was like, oh, that sounds fine. Yeah, no, the first time I did it, I was like, sure, I'll go out on site and do that. And then 5 hours later, I'm like, I think that this was me getting set up to fail. I don't think anything about this tiny little 1 hour visit was intended for me to actually leave with my hair, which is probably why some of my hair is gone now. But yeah, and back then, it would have been amazing. Not necessarily for like faxing, but a lot of the issues we ran into, back to the topic at hand, is like understanding like some of the low level behaviors a little bit better and having like tool sets to actually, investigate and debug things. Back then, everything was a black box of just, I had no idea what was going on. Like, yeah. I changed this setting and it works now. Okay, I'm done. I'll walk away. Don't know what that setting did.
Even being able to get something like pcaps back then was very different, right? Like
lots of spam ports.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I distinctly remember, I think it was the CCNA voice, one of the study guides back in the day when, I don't know that I would know what was in the CCNA voice or collaboration material anymore these days. But back then they actually taught you how like sampling an analog signal at different amplitudes got converted into binary. Like, and it was so visceral understanding like the physical way that an amplitude signal got translated into zeros and ones. It was easy to grasp, and I loved that about that material. But I also, like Alex, came out of that thinking, printers and fax machines are the two things that I will never touch again. You will not.
No, well, they're the only thing,
screen.
honestly, they're the only thing left with moving parts, right? That's why they're so
Paper.
terrible.
Yeah.
Right,
Even hard drives, right? Which, when they were still moving parts, hard drives were the things that failed all the time. Right?
It's true.
Did you ever see that the oatmeal comic about printers and how they were sent from hell to torment us? Right?
I don't know if I remember that one directly, but I have so many of those comics that I have enjoyed revisiting because they are so true.
Yeah, and even more relevant.
I would love to meet that author one day and just see what kind of experiences he had, because I feel like, again, support group type stuff, like we've all been there.
So funny note, he was at Denver Comic Con like 2018, I think, time frame, and the line to get something signed was so long. I was just like, nah, I'm not going to do this.
He did a good job. He's funny. He's funny. He understands comedy, which I appreciate.
Absolutely.
The best one is still the one where he talks about standards, and it's like there are 7 competing standards, and it's like everybody says, none of these are really awesome, so we're going to develop a brand new standard to unify them all. The last panel is
the story of our lives.
Yeah, 8 competing standards, Yeah. That's great.
Oh, and then it's also because of the siloing thing, right? So like, and part of it is like, I get it. A lot of it just comes from business pressure, right? Like you're a company. I experienced this with, like, let's take fiber, for instance, right? Like, if you are a company that builds fiber optic equipment, then you're going to make sure that there are more things out there that require fiber optic equipment and or software and stuff that is add-ons to the fiber optic equipment that you run, right? So naturally, you're going to try to promote those technologies that are going to make sure that you sell more ports. Fine, whatever, I get it, right? But it's like the degree that people don't talk to each other, or at least like the not invented here happens. Yeah, coordinate at all, right? And I'll tell you guys, like, maybe I should delete this part later, but 3GPP drives me nuts. It was like, why did you guys reinvent the entire OSI stack? Why? Why did you do that?
I think a lot of it because they could.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that, though. Yes, Wi-Fi has matured, but I feel like Wi-Fi has also just found problems to solve constantly. Right. And you look at all the standards that are coming, all the changes that are coming in each iteration, and you're like, okay, so 6E made sense. 7, I'm starting to question things. 8, I'm really starting to question things. I've got a friend of mine that works on for the Wi-Fi Alliance, and I always enjoy talking to him about, like, why did we do this again? What was the point? Is it just to sell another AP? Like, surely the AP
turnaround time for the Wi-Fi standards, their turnaround time has been kind of ridiculous. Right? Like you're talking about, like, this stuff hasn't even been baked yet, and you're already like doing the next one. Like, what?
Yep. Finding a problem and then building a solution for it.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but
yeah. And then the media, the tech media gets on top of things, and they like to repeat talking points over and over again. And it's like, okay, all right, here we go again.
Yep. We thought we fixed it, so we created a new standard to fix it. It sounds familiar.
It's like, I wish that would happen with spanning tree. But there's a part of me that's like, let's see if we can throw this off the rails.
Spanning tree.
If only it was a set and forget.
Yeah, we need to make a parody of We Don't Talk About Bruno.
Not a bad one.
It's like, if you want any meeting to go off the rails, you can, just toss in there the idea that maybe we should reinvent spanning tree or make a better spanning tree. It's like, no.
Well, no, that is, you know what? Spanning tree is an excellent example of the siloing, right? Because IEEE And all of IEEE is all the standards about layer 2, IETF is all the standards about layer 3, and they are totally different organizations. For the longest time, they didn't coordinate. They probably coordinate a lot more now just because it's the same people, right? But they were like, wow, this networking problem that, because we're only looking at layer 2, this networking problem is a real problem. We should invent a standard that solves this, even though it's basically redoing stuff that is already taken care of at higher layers. Right?
Are we talking about IPv6 again?
No.
Bad, Alex.
Oh,
IPv6 is it's a great example of so many things. So many things. Like there needing to be a killer use case in order for things to happen. People putting band-aids on things when it turns out that it didn't work the way that it was supposed to work,
I
right?
mean, we
Like
all love
it's
multicast. Everyone loves multicast. I can't find a single engineer that goes, "Yes, multicast today." I hope Jeffrey Handel listens to this podcast. I really do.
The thing that kills me is one day IPv6 will be ubiquitous and people will start to forget about IPv4, but I'm pretty sure spanning tree will still be the layer 2 loop prevention protocol.
Good chance.
It will be. It will be. Let's be honest. Cool. The only other question I had was kind of I always like to touch on the fact that the other cool thing about being in networking is we are simultaneously the producers and users of our own technology, right? And Brennan, when you were saying, because if you've been completely remote the whole time, one of the things that came up for me a lot, at least during COVID, was the fact that all of a sudden I imagine that you guys deal with this a lot just in terms of offering this kind of thing as a solution. And that is all of a sudden, when our houses had to suddenly become our offices, all of the security and privacy policies that are supposed to be in our offices had to really, 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 really also be in our houses too. And like, what was that like? Especially like if you're working for a big company, like,
I think we've done a pretty good job at making most of that stuff seamless, but we've definitely gone through, iterations where things are harder than others. I guess, like, I'm a big Apple guy. We do, HomeKit and iPhones at home and things like that. And so I am a sucker for running betas. Like, I can't not install the beta on my gear. I find, but it's also like the best way for everything, my network equipment, my iPhone, all this is for me to like go through the punishment of any other use. So like, I'm going to install the beta on my iPhone. I'm going to install our betas on all of the switches that run my house. And
nice.
I'm going to regret it like every single time. But
Is that like the guy from LifeLock driving around the truck with his social security number on it and being like, dare you?
It's similar. I mean, a little less, risky, I guess. But, there is almost no better way to learn, than forcing myself to solve those problems, and also losing sleep at night worrying that my wife and kids are going to be at home while I'm traveling somewhere halfway around the world. And I'm going to get a text message that says, Netflix isn't working.
Oh, yeah, right.
We've all been through that. But so, I mean, coming back to like how COVID changed things, I guess, I know I've struggled with things like I've been running betas and that breaks some of the applications that we use from time to time to like do our multi-factor authentication. And so I think it's good. Like, I get into that nice convenience of seeing like the multi-factor prompt pop up on my watch, and how convenient it is to just be able to like split the numbers at my watch. And next thing you know, I'm logged in. And every time I break that, I realize how much of an inconvenience it causes for our users,
Right.
So I appreciate that, but I think we've done a pretty good job at, at least at Cisco. We've really, I think, embrace the work from home, or like the hybrid work approach, I guess. Like, you can go into the office, you can go home, just get your stuff done. So it's been pretty seamless for us, but there's also been those times when like the VPN head end at corporate, goes down, and we do the best we can. But, Meraki is a great example of this whole cloud acceleration trend, right? And it's been pretty encouraging to see like how moving services to the cloud has meant like things are pretty seamless. Like we don't rely as
Right.
much on our VPNs anymore. We rely on kind of zero trust
Oh, that's
to,
true. That's true. Yeah.
yeah, to like authenticate us and continually authenticate us. And it like it's I think we've done a really good job actually. Like for me as an
Cool.
employee, it hasn't really cramped my style or anything like
Right.
that. Um, as much as we all complain a little bit about 2 or 3 extra button presses, we adapt pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say I've worked actually remote my entire time at Cisco for about 9 years, and I've never actually been in an office per se. When COVID hit, it was really funny, like with everyone that was like, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm not in the office. How do I work from home? What do I do? You do what? How do you have your office set up?" And we had like this entire like multi-month thing where people were posting like, "Well, here's how my office is set up. Here's how I did my desk. Here's how I did it." It's like, I've been doing this since I started here. Is this really like we can spend an entire hour talking about? Holy cow! But I mean, to Brennan's point, I think it like Cisco's done a really good job. I think of like the work from home and making services available. We all had growing pains for it. I mean, everyone being remote all of a sudden, we had to start offsetting meeting times to like 5 minutes later, 15 minutes later, trying to offset how much load we put on like the different video services that we had to use. But
Yeah.
it was good
Yeah.
times. But
Oh
yeah,
man.
I mean, overall, yeah, it's been a good kind of process, I guess.
That's cool. I'm just always worried about like, because this has come up a couple times, because it's like we have our family and our kids in there too. And during COVID, right, like the schools were trying to do remote schooling
Oh
and
no,
they were
thanks.
wanting them. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, right? So this is going to terrify you. They were very, how bureaucracies are. So like they were very adamant about making sure the kids are paying attention while they're online. And so they wanted to install remote desktop software like on their computers. And I'm like, no, there's no way in hell that is coming inside of my house. Get out of here. What?
No kidding.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So I
Ugh.
I say that because obviously I'm for kind of a smaller company that doesn't quite have as big of a risk, but I was thinking about that from, it's like all of a sudden there's there are people who are not under the same policies that are in the same network with you, right?
Yep. Yeah, totally. No, we actually have a lot of privacy, I think, which is nice. They have to have visibility into what kind of things we're transferring off our machines that are corporate owned, but yeah, we don't have any of the like crazy monitoring, mouse movement kind of crap that you see online. It's very much like
Right.
you're adults, please act like adults.
Well, well, and I feel like people have gotten more used to it. Yeah,
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 totally.
yeah. There's having worked in offices before. Is there anything you guys miss about it, or
I miss seeing people
yeah,
more often. It's kind of rough.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I do miss seeing people for sure. I do. I really enjoy the time I do get to be physically in the space of my team, like Alex, and we have a great team. But it's almost like I feel like one of the reasons I enjoy it so much is because it's like a scarce resource, right? Like I feel like I've gotten so used to being able to be isolated. Like it's so easy to just turn things off now and
yeah,
focus on getting something done
yeah,
that I feel like I would be easily irritated in the office where I was so easily accessible all the time.
yeah?
Like I
No, it's very
remember,
true, right? It's very true, right?
I remember a
But it's a
time.
strength because I can wheel around my
Yeah,
chair and say something, but
and like I that's the way I like getting things done too. It's interesting to look back, right? Because I used to appreciate walking down the hall to somebody else and being all like, let's face to face, and then we just unblock this and something gets done. But I also remember people coming into my office, to do the exact same thing and being all like, go away, I'm trying to get something done. So I don't know. I'm sure we would adapt either way.
yeah, yeah. Cool. All right. See, it's so easy to kill an hour.
It is.
That's why I love doing this stuff. Um, yeah. Anything else you guys wanted to bring up? I really, it's awesome. This is awesome. This is what I love doing about this show is like, because it's especially like learning that we really all kind of end up knowing each other. Like the industry is not that big, right?
It definitely is not. It's kind of creepy how small it is.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like even in like the standards bodies, like when somebody leaves, we're like, you'll be back. We know you'll be back. Oh, all
Too
right.
good.
Uh, yeah, no, thanks, guys. I super appreciate it. We didn't talk too much about it, but I don't really care. But do definitely check out the stuff that these guys have added to the Cisco Meraki dashboard with intelligent capture, where you can look at the packets in the app using Packet Viewer. It's very cool.
Heck yeah.
And
Yeah, keep an eye out for it. I guess it hasn't been released yet, but our MS17 firmware is expected to launch here probably in the first week of July. So you'll have
nice.
to, if you have switches, upgrade your switches to version 17, and then intelligent capture will show up. And that's it. We're literally looking forward to it. It's been a great collaboration with QA Cafe, and it'll
Yeah.
add some really cool abilities into the Meraki dashboard.
No, it's true. It's the best part about it, I think, is that we were able to sort of learn the use cases live, right?
Yeah.
Rather than sitting around and being like, let's build this thing, you know.
See if
It
people
was
will
cool.
use it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very awesome. All right, guys, I appreciate
Cool.
it. If you guys are listening, and everybody listening right now, do check out Cisco Meraki's stuff. Please hit that subscribe button on Epik Mellon. Check out Cisco Champion podcast too. It's actually really good. I was just learning a lot about industrial IoT the other day. And above all, own the nerdy things that you love and have fun doing them. Thanks, guys.